Hello. Welcome to a quick demonstration on how to make use of process transactions. So this is one of the functionality that is quite simple, but maybe is often overlooked. So in this scenario, you can have, let's say, a supplier invoice received from the supplier, but essentially in the system, you would like to record some separate transactions. It's all because that invoice may pertain to different departments. So let's say if you have utilities, a bill in there coming from the supplier, and you have an approval workflow wherein certain amounts, or if the transaction is being broken down into different department, let's sales, operations, and the approval would be prompted by that setup. So what you have to do is, you can create, let's say, a purchasing transaction or purchasing transactions for one supplier invoice. So those purchasing transactions will go through different approvals just based on the approval workflow that you have, which, as I said, based on department, right? So let's say if you have 3,300 worth of utilities in there. Maybe 1,100 is will be attributable to sales department, while the remaining 2,200 will be for operations department. Since you cannot create one transaction definition or one transaction for all of them, you would really have to create separate transactions first. So one workflow will go through one approval and the other one will go through another approval. Right, so that's how you're going to do it. But essentially, since you've just received one invoice, right, from your supplier, and the supplier is also expecting just one payment, lump sum payment for everything, right? And it will help the supplier able to reconcile in their bank recon that this particular payment for the 3,300 payment in there, it just belongs to one bill that has been made to you by the supplier, but not really on how you defined it in the company, wherein you have to segregate those in order to have that approvals achieved, right? Okay, so let's show you what can be done there. So we know that we have this feature in Intact, wherein you have under the configure purchasing, we have enable advanced processing. So that's under the enable functionality, enable advanced processing. So what it essentially does is that you can combine or split transactions. In our end, it's more of combination, right? It's all because that, again, when we receive that utilities bill, it's just because of the workflow that you have. It has to go through an approval process. And we know that once, let's say, department approval or department manager approval is required, then you cannot have more than one department in a particular transaction. So you have to segregate those essentially. So if you have one transaction definition in there, you will be having two transactions, right? And each transaction will go through an approval process depending on the department manager. But essentially, when those department managers already approved, then you can combine those two transactions into one, and that will essentially be your invoice that you'll be able to pay your supplier, and your supplier will just be receiving one lump sum instead of receiving like two payments, which is a bit confusing, right? It's going to be really tough for the supplier to reconcile if they're seeing like multiple payments just for one uh, invoice, right? Where in fact you just actually paid one invoice in one go. All right. Okay, so In this one here, I pre-created some at least two transactions. So I have here, if I go to, yep, so it depends on the workflow that you have anyways, but in my case, I just name it requisition, or maybe this is the only existing transaction definition that I have. So I've created this two transactions, right? So this one is coming from this supplier, um, but you can see here two transactions, right? Because this one, let's say PR0128, this is for sales department. So this will go through an approval process of the department manager of sales, and this one as well. This is the another portion of the bill, which is going to be for 200 operations, right? So which means that if you have an approval workflow, then it will go through the approval process, right? But then again, the ultimate supplier doesn't really care, how we are handling this at the back end, right? Because the supplier will just be looking at the entire um, bill or invoice that they've just given. So that will be the total of these two, all right? So that's the magic of a process transaction, that we can combine this essentially into another transaction definition, and that transaction definition will generate an AP posting, and you can pay that invoice to the supplier in one lump sum payment, right? And the supplier will just be seeing like one line item for that particular invoice in the bank reconciliation on their end. All right. So, yep, this is based on, of course, the setup that, we have the requisition in here, and the next stage will be another transaction definition. Okay. So let's process um, let's go through the process transaction. If you go to purchasing in here, all, and you have process transaction. So I know that everything has been created on this day, and I have create date. So a create transaction here rather is actually the transaction definition that will essentially be used to combine these transactions. So in my case, I know that I renamed it, or I named it purchase invoice. It's up to you how you would really want to achieve that. But then again, the purpose of this transaction definition is that this will be posting to your AP, because this will be the one that will essentially be paid to the supplier. But the from transaction in here is the original transaction that we created only on our end in order to achieve that requirement, wherein certain amounts or transactions will have to go through department managers. Once we have department approval in there in place, you cannot have more than one department per transaction. So we have to segregate them essentially, right? As what we've seen here. We have one for sales and one for operations. All right, so get the farm transaction. This field will just be filtered by on how you define, created from on the transaction definition. Since I've chosen purchase invoice, it will just show me those transaction definitions defined as the original transaction definition of this setup. Right. In my case, I only have requisition, because when I created requisition transaction definition, the next layer will be purchase invoice. And this purchase invoice doesn't have any other original transaction. So that's why I can only see requisition in there, which is I would like to get right, because looking at this one here, that's the type of the transaction definition that I would really like to capture and merge from, right? Okay, so I have this one here, supplier. I know that my supplier is this, and I'd like to process the transactions. So you also have there, maybe you can just choose base currency as well. So what's the process type? Yep, so I would like to merge them, because again, you only received one invoice from the supplier. I just have to segregate the same per department because of the approval. And yeah, so I have process by merge because I will go into merge those transactions. And if I click on view here, Let's have a look. Yep. So I have PR0128 and 129 in there, right? Perfect. Yeah, these are the transactions that I would like to merge into one. And then supplier document number. So I have, let's just copy this one, merge PO line. Let's put there 101. All right, and click on create. So when you click on this one here, so we are going to merge these two transactions into one, right? So we're going to merge this transaction definition called requisition into another transaction definition called purchase invoice. And if I click on create, now this is the screen that you would be familiarized, right? When you click on convert in there, and this is the screen that you will see in here. The good thing with this is that you already have those two lines combined, right? And more importantly is that we still have that segregation in there per department, right? And essentially, if this is posting, then you will see separate posting on those departments involved. All right, so we have the correct amount in there, 3,000 exclusive of tax, and we have 300 there for the tax amount, and you have the supplier reference number, document number rather, and yeah. Okay, so what I can do is that I click on post, and yep, it's already in there. So we already have that transaction in there, right? So when you try to process it further, I'll just close this one. Let's try processing it further. I will not carry on with the actual payment, but I just would like to show you what's the implication, right? If we go to accounts payable and pay AP purchase invoice, let's say, um, I don't want that. It doesn't matter anyways. I will not be selecting anything, but let's look for that supplier again. Yeah, yep. So you know this one payment request method. So if you go generate one request per AP purchase invoice, then that's even better. It's all because is that when I click on apply filter, right? And yep, I have other existing ones. Okay, so we're just talking about this one, right? Which is the one that we just created. So this is for this particular AP purchase invoice in there. That one, which is good, which means that when you process that, as you can see, the original transactions, we have two original transactions, right? These two, but we combine them into one, which is this, and that's the one appearing in your pay per purchase invoice. That's why if this is the only transaction that you have for the supplier, then if you merge it anyways by a by AP purchase invoice, then they will only be seeing one line, 3,300 instead of, if you have these two lines, then my digital supplier may actually be confused as like, yeah, what's going on there? We have 1,100, and they probably have a lot of things to worry anyways. But having multiple lines just for one invoice is going to be very confusing for the supplier. For your supplier to reconcile. So in this case, you already have one AP purchase invoice. You converted, two transactions into one, and that converted transaction will be the one that's going to be paid, and there's only be one line, and your supplier will be seeing one line as well in the bank reconciliation when they do that. So yeah, hopefully this demonstration helps on how to make use of process transaction in essentially combining transactions into one. Thank you.